last year I reviewed a movie called Almost Human, and first of all, if your reaction to that statement is, wait, isn't that a TV show? Good, because you do not need to know about the movie. But I remember at the beginning of that video, I started off with this very unnecessary talk about how aliens are not my favorite kind of movie monster, but now I'm starting to recognize there are actually, like, a fuck ton of movies out there involving aliens that I love, so at this point, I would definitely rate them amongst slashers and vampires as one of my favorite types of movie monsters. So tonight's discussion is on both versions of War of the Worlds, and the base synopsis to each of these movies is that Mars is dying, so the inhabitants of that planet have come to declare war on Earth and conquer this planet so that they can start over again. Now, as has been the trend over the past couple of days, this is where the similarities really end between these two films. And it's kind of funny because first you had the book War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, then there was the radio broadcast by Orson Welles, which was nothing like the book, and then you had the original movie, which was nothing like the radio broadcast, and now you've got this Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise movie, which is nothing like the original film. But to start off with what these two films have in common, let's talk about the characters. Both versions of War of the Worlds have characters in them. In the original film, you mostly follow this scientist who meets a young woman, and of course eventually they start to form a little relationship with each other, and they're very simple, but they are very likable characters who the audience can easily identify with, and of course you do want to see them get out of this terrible situation. In the remake, the star is Tom Cruise, who starts off as just this deadbeat piece of shit dad who, obviously goes through a character arc in the film where he learns to care for his kids as the alien invasion takes place. And overall, he's not the greatest character in a movie ever, but I liked him. I thought he was pretty okay, and I even thought he was really funny at times. Even now, he manages to get some good laughs out of me. On the other hand, his kids are just sort of blah. Like, he's got this son who's just a cookie-cutter, rebellious teenage character, and then once the invasion hits and everything, he goes through his own arc, and it actually makes a lot less sense than the one that Tom Cruise goes for. I mean, it just comes right the fuck out of nowhere with this kid. Also, there's a daughter played by Dakota Fanning who is established very well at the beginning as this very intelligent little girl, and as the movie goes on, and as, I'm repeating this phrase a lot, but as the invasion hits, she ends up being a sort of emotional anchor for his dad, and ends up becoming just as much of a hero as he is. And yes, I was absolutely talking out of my ass just then. Holy shit, this character is annoying. I mean, I was being half honest. She does start off as a very intelligent and well-written character, and it would have been ideal if she had overcome her fear by the end of the film and ended up helping her dad out in some way, but that never happens. She just kind of breaks down and spends most of the film screaming and crying and is just kind of there as a thing for Tom Cruise to keep safe. Now, in her slightest defense, a child can be as smart as they come, maybe even more intelligent than me, but at the end of the day, they may still have the emotional depth of a child, and if this catastrophic event were to occur, they're going to react with fear and upset. And I will admit that there are, like, a couple of brief moments where her screaming does come warranted, and she even manages to kind of save her dad's life at one point by doing what she does best, screaming. But for the most part, the screaming is just downright obnoxious and absurd. I mean, there was one scene where it would have been really, really easy to tug at the audience's heartstrings and, strike an emotional chord. And it's a scene where, in the midst of the attack, this little girl is screaming that she wants her mommy. However, the way that they play that scene out makes her come off as much less sympathetic and much more as just a grating little brat. I mean, that level of incompetence had to have taken some effort. Bravo, Mr. Spielberg. And then during the beginning of the nonsensical character arc on the brother's part, she goes up to him to talk him out of it in this manner. Somebody needs to fucking tranquilize this girl. Also, the original is almost like the original version of The Blob, whereas there are no human villains, with the exception of one short scene where you see how violent people will get in this type of situation. But the remake does explore a lot more of that. And one such instance involves a great celebrity cameo that occurs near the final act of the film. Now getting into the tripods which the aliens use as transportation in each version of War of the Worlds. In the original, the special effects aren't exactly perfect. For one thing, you can only kind of see the legs of the tripods during their first appearance. Also, when one of them is rising from the meteor, you can actually see the wires that are holding it. But they still look cool as hell. They've got this great aesthetic with these gold ships with little green lights on them. And it actually makes a big difference that the effects are actually physical. And the film has this great suspenseful scene involving a probe coming out of one of the tripods and entering a house snake-like. In the remake, the tripods look pretty fucking awesome. In fact, I think that most everyone can agree that they're the best part of the entire film. It is kind of questionable, though, why the first one suddenly appears from underground, but it is a really awesome reveal scene nonetheless, and when you see them starting to wipe out people, it feels a little more effective with the way that they do it in the remake with modern special effects, of course. And one of the only scenes that Spielberg remakes from the original, sorry about that pause, I heard a weird noise from outside, but one of the only scenes that he takes from that movie is the scene with the probe, and this leads to easily one of the most fun and suspenseful scenes in the entire film. And now on to the antagonistic Martians of War of the Worlds, which you don't really see that much of in each film, but they are fairly memorable when they appear. In the original version, you only get to see a couple of brief glimpses of what the Martians look like, and it's a pretty cheap effect. It's actually kind of laughable by today's standards, but it still looks really cool, and it's still unlike anything else that I've seen in a movie. And there's even one great special effect that they used near the end, which involves a single arm of one of the aliens. Now, of course, in the remake, the special effects used for the Martians are a lot better, and they do look pretty awesome. I love the way that their bodies are designed, the way that they move, the way that they sound, and their appearance in the film is yet another great suspenseful scene, not unlike that of the scene with the probe. The only real flaw with them, though, is that the shape of their heads is completely derivative of the aliens from Independence Day. So, in conclusion, a lot of people hated Spielberg's remake of War of the Worlds, and I can understand why, but I still enjoy it as just kind of a popcorn monster flick. However, I'm going to say that the original is a superior film. It has a much better pace to it. I love the color scheme to the movie, especially considering that it came out during a decade where black and white films were still fairly common. They just went all out with the color scheme of the film. And although the special effects are pretty cheap, they are very aesthetically pleasing, and they are at least more original. And although the characters are much more simple in the way that they're written, they are at least more consistent throughout the film. And I appreciate the fact that they don't scream at unnecessary times. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for this comparison. I hope you all have a good one.